Run Junkies, welcome back to the Journey to Triathlon series, where in the month of June so far we've been talking about the training plan specific to a sprint triathlon and maybe as a novice runner, what you might need to know and some terminology specific to the swim and the bike. And today, yes, we come all the way back around to the run portion of triathlon. Now, yes, we do talk quite a bit about running around here. And for more information, you might check out this playlist right here. This is basically a good playlist for novice runners, but it also has a lot of really good information in it, so start there. Today, like I said, I am going to talk about the triathlon run specifics, and if you are a runner, how to bring your running into multisport. If there is one takeaway that I want you to get from this video and the last few videos, is that most of your training, probably 75% or more, is done in heart rate zones 1 and 2. Training by heart rate and using that metric is the most accurate picture you will get of your current level of fitness and the effort you're putting into your training. But if you haven't done it in a while or haven't done it at all, transitioning into heart rate training can be challenging. I get that, but I want to stress why training by heart rate, particularly in triathlon, is so important. If you looked at this video right here, you saw we are working out. We are doing 6 to 8 workout sessions within a week. And in those peak weeks, even for a sprint triathlon that might take you just a couple of hours, your training load is up to 8 hours a week, maybe even more. Our bodies will simply not let us do that for very long in those higher heart rate zones, in those higher effort levels, without basically rising up in open revolt. And that shows up in overtraining and fatigue and injury. Therefore, like I said, we spend a lot of time in zones 1 and 2, a little bit of time in the tempo zone or zone 3, and just a few minutes, maybe even per week in zone 4, but not much more than that. Now, I got a question from one of my longtime viewers, and she asked me, how do you run in that zone 1 and 2 range? It's like you're barely even moving. And yeah, I get it, it's hard. It has taken me 3 years of looking at my heart rate data and seeing how training in those lower zones will ultimately result in better and faster times. I've seen improvement. It is possible. And heart rate training takes a lot of patience, and it is extremely challenging, and you kind of have to check your ego at the door. So whatever you think your pace should be, forget about it, because if you look at your heart rate zones, that's going to be a more accurate picture of what your training really should be. And I'll tell you one thing, I did this too. Most runners will run their hard runs too easy and their easy runs too hard, much too hard. I have seen improvement by training with heart rate, and it is possible. And heart rate training takes commitment, and it is super challenging, but it is worth it over the long haul. And I will say that if you fall in love with triathlon and this is something you want to do long term, then I would suggest really leaning into that heart rate piece of it. But if you don't train by heart rate or don't have a heart rate monitor, aren't tracking that metric, basically what I would suggest is that whatever you think is easy, go even slower. So let's get into warm-ups and cool downs. Now, let me just point you to that video right there. That is my dynamic warm-up and stretching routine that I do before every run. It's a really great place to start before you even take a step on your runs. That's just a really great place to start. 5 or 10 minutes on those dynamic stretches, and then you jump into your workout. For the cool down, after you are finished running, even if you're in zone 1, take a few minutes to walk around, 5 to 10 minutes of walking briskly, or even just nice, easy stroll back to your house or your car, wherever you're going. And foam roll. Taking a few minutes after every workout to foam roll those muscles that you just worked will aid in your recovery and prepare you for the next workout, probably the next day, if not the same day. So let's look at a couple of the workouts in this training plan alongside some of the data that I've gathered throughout this training plan and with these runs specifically. Again, most of the time and most of the running falls in zone 1. Easy pace, conversation pace. Not only should you be able to carry on a conversation, but you should be able to do so without getting winded. Now, to be frank, more often than not, I end up a little bit higher in zone 2, but I really try to pay attention to that and bring it back down to zone 1 when the plan calls for it. But usually if I'm right on that bubble of zone 1 and zone 2, I don't concern myself too much with it. If I do start popping up into zone 3, then I will definitely start walking and bring myself back to zone 1. So let's look at a couple of these from my training plan. So for the first couple of weeks, I had these build runs. Here are your dynamic warm-ups, core strength exercises. Basically, this is 10 to 15 minutes of dynamic stretching. That's about what I do. Then you have 3 steps, and you're stepping it up each time. Zone 1 for 15 minutes, zone 2 for 10 minutes, zone 3 for 6 minutes. My zone 1 is anything under 143 beats per minute. That day, it translated to a 14-minute or slower pace. Zone 2 translates to a 143 to 157 beats per minute. That day, it was about an 11 to 12-minute pace per mile. Zone 3 was 6 minutes at 158 to 168 beats per minute. This is your tempo pace. And that day, it was close to 9:30 to 10:30 minute miles. Now, I want you to notice something. The difference between that zone 1 and that zone 3 pace, this was slower than 14-minute miles. This was faster than 10-minute miles. The difference in pace was 4 minutes or more per mile. Now, that should be a clue as to how we should be looking at what easy really is and what hard really is. Then I finish off by really slowing down to almost a walk, a slow shuffle for 5 minutes in zone 1 just to get my heart rate back down, then cool down with a walk for 5 to 10 minutes, then stretch. So now you're seeing at what we're looking at and how challenging this can be. Later, the next week, I had a tech run, which was a warm up in zone 1 of 10 minutes. Again, I've done my dynamic stretching, but this tech run really translates to intervals. So zone 3, all right, again, that super fast pace for 1 minute and then a recovery of 1 minute. And I do that 6 times. So it's 6 by 1 minute in zone 3 and 1 minute in recovery. Now, because it takes me a while for my heart rate to kind of catch up to my feet, I will use the information from the other run, from that build run that I was just telling you. So I was shooting for a 9:30 to 10 minute pace on this 1 minute, and then a slower than 14-minute pace on the recovery minute. And then a zone 1 for 8 minutes, and then a cool down for 5 to 10 minutes. Then lastly, we have the test run, and I just recently did this. Now this is a progression. Okay, we're starting off again, doing those dynamic stretches first. Zone 1 for 5 minutes, zone 2 for 3 minutes, zone 3 for 2 minutes. Then bring it back down, and really I walked this 5 minutes to keep myself going. Now, then this is a time trial. Again, like the swim and the bike, this is a benchmark. So a 3K time trial at best effort, that translates to a 1.86 miles, and then I record the time and the heart rate. Then I do a zone 1 for 10 minutes just to kind of bring things back down again and cool down for 5 to 10 minutes. Now, the whole point for this is to see my progression in triathlon. Again, I kept in those pace ranges for all 3 of these zones, brought it back down, and then I will tell you that for this time trial, it was really hard to stay in zone 3. Now, it doesn't say that here, but my watch was programmed to be in zone 3. It was really hard to stay there for that almost 2 miles. So I will say that I finished off at an average of a 9:45 minute pace, and that's really how that worked out. It was great. So in a triathlon training plan, especially a sprint triathlon, Why are we spending so much time in zone 1? We're only running 2 to 3 days a week at a maximum of 45 minutes, maybe up to an hour for a long run. How are we getting and maintaining that running fitness? Shouldn't I be running faster in order to keep that fitness or get myself prepared? The answer is no, because you are not only training for running, you are also training for swimming and cycling. Like I said, spend too much time in those higher zones and you are risking overtraining and injury. Zone 1 training helps you build that base endurance. So if you can become more efficient of a runner, if your cardiovascular system can become more efficient in those lower zones, when we do turn up the speed, we will be far more efficient and possibly even faster. The bottom line is this: for many of you watching this video, the run segment of triathlon is probably the easiest to embrace and the most comfortable for you. However, if you haven't been training by heart rate in those lower zones, you might find it extremely challenging. I would ask you to embrace that challenge. Run by heart rate for a while. Maybe take a whole training cycle and dedicate yourself to training by heart rate just to see how it feels. Like I said, you'll have to check your ego at the door. Whatever pace you think you should be, forget it. Training by heart rate will have long-term lasting effects. And certainly if you are training for your first triathlon, I would encourage you to slow your roll a little bit. Whether or not you are training by heart rate, just slow things down so you can ensure that you can get all the training in for all 3 disciplines. My question for you today is this: what metrics do you use to determine your effort on a run? Do you train by heart rate or perceived exertion or pace? Please leave thoughts, questions, comments, and suggestions in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. More triathlon stuff coming up in the month of July. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. Get out there, go find your awesome, and until next time, happy running.